Welcome to the Smart and Soulful Money Podcast. I'm your host, Carrie B. Van Winkle. I'm a socially responsive investment advisor with Natural Investments, and a warm welcome to you. My guest today is Susan Bradley, who's a CFP and a CEFT. She's the founder of the Sudden Money Institute. This began 18 years ago as a community of practice seeking to better serve financial planning clients by developing processes and tools for the personal side of money and for clients going through transitions. This think tank created the Certified Financial Transitionist designation and a division for training and certification called the Financial Transitionist Institute. Susan has served on the FPA, Financial Planning Association's National Board of Directors, the National Football League's Players Association's Financial Education Advisory Board, and serves as the Dean of Transitions for the Council of Deans of the Purposeful Planning Institute. She is seen and heard frequently in the national media, including NBC's Nightly News, CNN, NPR, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. Susan's the author of one of my favorite money-related books called Sudden Money, Managing a Financial Windfall. And her TEDx Wilmington Women Talk is called Change Launches You into the Next Great Chapter of Your Life, whether you like it or not. She is the recipient of the Insiders Forum Iconoclast Award 2017. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here.
In your bio, I've already started to mention financial transitions and sudden money. So introduce listeners to what a sudden money experience is and what a financial transition is.
That would have been a hard question to answer 25 years ago when I first got interested in this. What I saw was when people had a major financial change, that it kicked off an experience. And that experience was in many ways a tough time for them, even if there was a windfall. So the book says windfall, and it implies that it's a large increase. First of all, it doesn't have to be large according to anybody except the recipient. It's enough to radically change some aspects of their life. So it's about change. We found out that the same kind of neurophysiological, sociological shift happens with a sudden drop. So it is about change, not the amount or whether it's up or down. And in fact, a lot of times it's not even a financial change. It's a liquidity event. Someone is all of a sudden responsible for managing assets and financial decisions in a family that they hadn't done before. Could even be someone who has retired and now all those retirement assets need to be used for income or something else. And it's a shift in, again, responsibility and the objective. So a transition sounds like everybody's using that term these days, because, Lord, we all have gone through this or going through, present tense, this global change, the pandemic. So we're talking about change and new normal and transition and all these words. But a transition actually is a transit. It is the movement from point A to point B. And in the world we're addressing, point A is a change, a major change in life. And point B is how you'll be once that change has completed. But there's a gap. So a transition, by definition, is temporary. There is no prescription or equation of how long it should take. It's not like, a widow takes these number of years, an inheritor these number of years. It's not like that. It's very, very individual. So the transit is where we have trouble as humans and parents and children and teachers and partners. We have trouble seeing what happens there. Because as a culture, we really like to see the job, do the job, move on, So, okay, this happened. Okay, tell me what to do. Good, I got that in place. Move on. And that's not the way nature seems to have created us and these experiences. So you can say as a financial planner, okay, when someone retires and they're this age, they have this longevity, they have this, and this, you can figure it all out. But there's a real human being. And that human being is in a transit, and it's hard to see. So you can see if you push a button, I just go. So I'm sorry about that. I'm very impassioned, particularly because we're talking not to the profession, but to real people that have probably had transitions in their past. Maybe they're having them now, or maybe they're looking down the road and they see one coming.
So for listeners, you probably don't know that am finishing up my initial phase in becoming a certified financial transitionist. Hopefully that will be complete very soon, and look forward to bringing the methods and the resources into my practice more and more as a financial transitionist. And so I'm just really on board and impressed and inspired and excited about what you all have built, Susan, with the toolbox and the depth of knowledge about helping people through financial transitions and better helping clients navigate that as well. So to back up for a second, I hadn't read your bio before to know that one of the things that you have done is work with NFL players or sit on a guiding board to help support NFL players. And I've always, to me, the classic examples in our culture of sudden money include lottery winners and pro athletes. I feel like the most common cultural stories around sudden money, the even TV shows where they, are making TV shows of telling the story, those are two of the more commonly told stories. And we know those stories in our culture, and we know that they're not always happy endings. And a lot of times, actually, they are not happy endings. And so I just want to connect that for listeners that is what we're talking about. And the much more common experience in our culture for people are other types of sudden money experiences. You mentioned a couple of these already: divorce, loss of a spouse, inheriting from a loved one. Suddenly you're responsible for this retirement account or these retirement accounts that you always just let, your employer took care of for you for the most part. Suddenly you've retired or you're getting ready to retire. It feels much more real and you feel much more responsible for it. And then you mentioned the other liquidity of a business, selling a business and then suddenly having a windfall from that. Those are some of the examples, especially a few of those are really much more common in our culture and what we see.
The reason I wrote the book was another kind of windfall that is inherently problematic, and that was the receipt of a legal settlement. And usually it means that there's some damage. There's a reason why it's happening. And that damage usually is not wiped out by a legal or a financial settlement. It's a reality. And when I heard about this group of women that were part of a class action lawsuit against Dow for breast implant medical or health complications, I was shocked and concerned. They were not my clients. They probably would never be my clients. They were all over the country, but the lead attorney was someone I knew through social contacts. And as I heard the story, it shocked me to the bone, quite honestly. And when I thought about these women, which is probably a blessing and a curse in my life, and I think in the life of many financial planners, it's not about numbers. It's about human, and it's about the feeling and the responsibility that you have as a financial planner. A good financial planner feels their client's situation. So anyway, it was disturbing and it changed my life. And I talk about that on that TED Talk, so I don't need to repeat it. But I went from there to trying to find out financial planning wise, how do you help people? And there was no protocol. So I got interested in it. And I was in the financial literacy world. I was part of national movements for education in schools and that kind of thing. And I had a program for women called Women, Meaning, and Money. So I was already interested in how we process as humans. So anyway, so the book gets written, and while I was writing that, I realized, wow, I see something similar for widows. I see something similar for divorced people. So I could see this human thing that was happening. It's pretty universal. But Carrie, was really interesting. What people would say is, and I would say it too back then, like a lottery winner needs financial literacy. Their problem is they don't understand stocks, bonds, mutual funds, debts, and cash flow and that sort of thing. And that you couldn't then, but you could certainly now get off the shelf. If you want to get financial literacy, man, it's out there. And then when the NFL called one day and I started to think about working with them, I felt kind of like they were too big and probably too much of a mess, and I didn't have time for that in my life. But there was a woman who was running this department there, Dana Hammond's still there, and she just won me over because she was interested in the same thing. So again, I thought it was financial literacy, and I was dead wrong again. What I learned from all of these more exaggerated, not frequent kind of events was it was about transition literacy. And Carrie, I'll tell you the truth. I learned that at a time that I had no idea what those words meant. They came out of my mouth. And when someone said, "Oh, that's interesting, tell me more," I would say, "Excuse me, I have to go to the restroom or something. Just get me out of that conversation." I didn't know my this from my that about it. And one of the cohorts, I didn't start the institute because I wanted an institute. I started it because I was pestered to death by several of my colleagues who wanted to know more about this. And they were frankly too lazy to learn it. They wanted me to learn it and go teach them. So I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but it's actually true. I can tell you exactly where and when they won me over. But what we needed to know was what is this human transition thing? And there's not very much out there on that topic 20 years ago. So a guy named Bill Bridges, great name for someone who's in charge of transition thing, right? So he had written books from the early 80s. And he had a transition model that they happen in stages, and he named the stages and he named the challenges. And we read it as a retreat group. We had an Inward Bound program, and that was our textbook. And we said, oh my gosh, he is naming what we see. And that's when we started to learn about transitions. But you can't take transitions from executive coaching, which is what he did, and apply it to financial planning. You have to create your own version for your industry. So that led us into the transition world, which is where we probably started, but we didn't know it.
Something that's been on my mind is a more recent version of a newer version of sudden money, windfalls of money that is now in our culture that I'm seeing are GoFundMes. When people raise money through like a GoFundMe type of structure. And some of them are, very specific. So you raise money, let's say it's for a helpful cause, you raise money to help somebody pay off medical bills, or something like that. And that's very manageable. It doesn't quite have the same feel. But being in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor lived, her family lives, every day as we, kind of wait for justice for Breonna and her family, I'm following what's happening and unfolding. And This is late September now that we're having this conversation. A few months ago in the news, I would see, Kanye West donated this much money to Breonna Taylor's family, and so donated this much money to the GoFundMe. And I would check it, wow, it's at how many millions of dollars now, and I just would worry, like, it still is on my mind. Like, I hope that they are going to find somebody to support them to navigate this in a way that is supportive to them and not exploitive of them. I just think anyone who has a windfall, it can be vulnerable to being taken advantage of, and we've heard those cultural stories. It's something that's been on my mind. It's just kind of a new version of the windfall experience.
It's actually been on my mind too, because I'm probably as immersed in this as one can be, since I sold my business 16 years ago to do this full time. And I don't know everything, and everyone is an individual, but when you have the circumstances of the Taylor family, it is a setup for long-term regret, and it's also a setup for long-term success and productivity and meaning. It could go either way, and it's probably somewhere in between. It's not the kind of thing that, for instance, I couldn't call that family and say, hey, I think I can help you, because there's a real sense of being careful of predators. So everyone you don't know is a predator. And that's consistent. I see that all around the world. So what happens as a default is people reach out within their inner circle. A family like that really needs a team. They don't need one, they need a team. And in our world, we call that a brain trust. And we work with the family before they set up the brain trust. How do they want to be involved? Do they want to be the center point, or do they want to appoint people who are the directors? Who does what? Who sets agendas? Who identifies meaning and purpose that we always have to go back to? And it's usually at least 3 members on the team, and sometimes more. And most professionals, and I hope that you have had a different experience, we're of a different age, so hopefully things have gotten better with time, but most professions have not learned how to collaborate. Everyone's an alpha dog. And lawyers think only lawyers can do this because, when I used to be on faculty for an estate planning program, this national program, the attitude was kind of, yeah, but we're lawyers and you're not. And now I'm working with national and some international groups of accountants. And it's, yeah, but we know tax and tax rules a day. And insurance, everybody has this story. So they kind of come in, and you never know the reciprocity that's been happening prior to the formation of the brain trust. So I've learned over the years, I experimented with this myself with my clients and ran into a whole list of challenges that still probably exist. So the Taylor family needs to have people they can trust, because their trust in humanity has been blown apart. Now, maybe it's coming together with all the activity, and we hope so. And the GoFundMe is a vote of strong confidence. Somebody is saying this money should help you do something that is important to you and for the community. So there's a voice behind it, that can get lost in the wilderness. So what you want families to do is to stay safe. It's a different kind of safety. And find a way to have structured, meaningful, and probably really difficult conversations. Most families don't have those because they don't have to. Some people are exquisite at it, and most of us humans are a little rough around the edge. So if someone helps them have conversations, I don't know if there's agreement or disagreement within the family. And even if there's agreement today, doesn't mean there won't be disagreement tomorrow, because this is all moving, right? Someone has to help them know that they can gather and have tough conversations, that it's okay, that they don't learn through the first or second time they try and do something that it's not worth it because it blows up in your face and, that kind of thing. So everybody holds back. Families frequently have that dynamic, so no one wants to talk. So, yeah, they have to learn that they can talk. There's a way to do it. And there are people, Peggy Fry, who's one of our faculty members, studies that. She works with complicated families. And she can hold a family meeting that has the potential to go all different directions. It's a skill. So I would hope that for the family, there will be helpers, there will be predators. Sometimes they get very confused. You can set up some parameters. I would assume the family has a legal settlement from the city.
They have announced that, just in the last few weeks.
And those sums are not small. They're usually divided. The attorneys that settle it get a fair amount of that money. So when the public hears a number, that number is almost never the right number. Like when you hear someone won $100 million in a lottery, their net amount is about $33 million, which is nothing to sneeze at. We would all find useful things to do with that, but it's not 100. So whatever you hear, there are expenses, there are professional fees, but it's still more than they've had and opens up more possibilities.
I think one of the things that's important to say that you teach about and the program teaches about is how culturally a lot of times someone from outside looking in on a sudden money experience says, wow, that's wonderful. That was, in some, not with the Taylor family, would they say this, but with other, with a lottery winner, for example, or an inheritor. Wow, that's great. I wish that was me. That must be nice. That kind of mentality about the sudden money experience and the reality that people know who go through it is, and I think you're speaking to so much in several ways about the Taylor family, is there is so much emotion, so much challenge, so much to navigate that is a challenge and has a negative emotion attached to it. And life experience, there's, like you were saying earlier about an insurance settlement, there's so much tied to it. So a lot of what you teach about navigating this is helping people navigate not only the opportunity of sudden money, but a lot of it is helping people navigate the challenge that they walk through when they have these experiences.
The relationships. One of the first clients that I met after I wrote the book, and I was really naive. No one had ever figured this thing out, and I don't think that I did either. I just started it. But I was the only one that was talking about, therefore I was the expert, it's a precarious place to be. But a woman came in and her child died while she was giving birth, and it was 5 years later, and there was some large settlement, let's call it 5 million, I don't quite remember. And one of her biggest challenges is that people, instead of feeling her sorrow that she had lost her child in that way, the attitude was, too bad you lost the kid, but now you got money. And she said that was showing up. Her mother even said something like that. And when people have a loss and there's a settlement, they are re-triggered, they're re-traumatized. We have trauma therapists in, helping us understand that. And it's like it's happening all over again. So here this woman receives the settlement after a long battle, and the lawyers are done. They've gotten their payday, and they don't have any process beyond getting the money. They're your best friend, and then they're done. They move on to the next client. Good or bad, that's their system. So there she is with her family, envious of the money, with hands out, and she is going through the heartbreak that she had gone through 5 years ago. I can remember clearly just sobbing my heart out after I'm starting to do it now as I tell the story. So it is complicated. What I would tell any family, and Taylor family is public, so they have that part of it. And that's what happens with athletes. They have a celebrity side of it, which complicates it. They're now different than everybody else. That's a very hard thing. The term in sociology is peerlessness, when you don't have peers. And it's confusing. So you're kind of finding your new set of people. And if it's professionals that are trained to come in and do their job and then to leave, that can feel really abrupt too. So it's tricky space. We probably should write more books on this so that, the ones we're writing now are more on families in retirement, but this is a good one that you're bringing up. What I'd love to tell the Taylor family is to move slowly, learn to talk to each other, and understand this is probably a 5 or 6 year process of integrating this money. But to think about 5 years from now, if you looked back on right now, September 2020, what would make you feel proud of yourself? What kind of choices, decisions, conversations would get you where you want to go that 5 years from now you could say, wow, that was horrible, but you know what? I did it. I leaned in, I got it. So know that there's a big after, but the after doesn't come for a long time. 5 years is a long time for someone who's suffering.
You teach about the 4 stages of transition. That's really one of the basics of understanding what we go through when we navigate financial transitions.
Yeah. Transitions always happen in stages. We just did a lit review of all these different industries and professions and sciences. Everything deals with change and everything has stages. In the financial world, there's a stage that not every other one have, and that is anticipation. When you know you're going to retire, or you know that you're going to sell a business, or you know that there's an inheritance, you know there's something coming. You don't know when, you don't know how much, but you're starting to make decisions based on what you think is happening. So someone might say, well, I don't need to save for retirement because when grandpa dies, we're selling the farm and they've already told me that we're all going to get whatever, so I don't need to save. And that's what can happen in a negative way. In a positive way, when you know it's coming, you can start to practice these conversations that we've been talking about and learn how you are your very best when you're in a professional meeting setting or making decisions, or how you like to prepare for those meetings. You can learn about that. You can learn from your certified financial transitionist your tendencies. Are you promotion focused? Do you always like to talk about the positive, or do you want to make sure that the negative is covered? Prevention focus. It's kind of a hardwired thing. You can learn, let's say you're in relationship with someone and you're both going to go through this. So what do you each expect? And you can flesh out a lot of this and be more prepared for the experience. When the experience happens, we call that the second stage, ending. And in the second stage, that's when the event has happened. There's no going back. You have to go forward. A lot of people want to go back to the old days. They're over. You have to create your new old days. And that's a pretty busy time because you have to deal with legal things and moving accounts and changing names and maybe moving yourself. There's a lot. And it looks like you could make a list and say, do these things or do them in that order. But what happens there, Carrie, as you know, is people frequently, their stress response to change can be fatigue. So people that are otherwise high functioning feel like they're walking through mud, or they're numb, or they're fogged over, or they have different ways of saying it. So it's hard to pay attention, to remember to think long term instead of short term.
To make decisions.
Yeah, and every decision matters. There's an old saying I love from Christina Baldwin, and it is, choice by choice, we turn life's straw into gold. Go slowly if that's what you're doing. Take your time. So, that there's a whole process for sorting and prioritizing decisions. And then when the big pieces of life are put back together, most people think, okay, I'm done. But that's when the real transit's happening. And that's called passage. Bill Bridges called it neutral zone, and we don't find it neutral at all. It's measured in years, not months. Ending might have taken a year or so to put it all together. And then there's this gap time. And it's like the interior of a chrysalis for a butterfly. A lot of stuff still happening. And the parts and pieces of the next iteration are putting themselves together. So it's a beautiful time. It's beautiful. If someone encourages you, like you now would encourage, you probably did it naturally anyway, but encourage people to be conscious and aware and to think through and to not get themselves tied up in something they can't change. Back up and turn around, try it again. You want people to explore and discover and then reinvent. Our nature in our culture is to get over it, get it done. So you want to be with someone who can say, well, now let's maybe think about it this way. Oh, look what you found. So how is this? So how about this? What do you see now that you're standing here? So it's your thinking partner, your guide. It's not someone who's telling you what to do. It's someone who's helping you FIO, figure it out.
Part of what I'm hearing with that too is creating space to be creative versus just plugging along, being reactive, and making the space for that as you are creating this new life that you're moving into, that you're really taking space to vision what you want that to look like, and then how you can make that happen and what support you need, rather than just react, and you're plugging along. And then it's like, why is my life like this? Is this really, what I want?
One of our protocols is to go to the balcony. And we like that term. Like, instead of being in the weeds, or you can use a dance floor, you go to the balcony, you see the dance completely differently. And both are important. So we like to invite people to do some interior work on the balcony, short or long or whatever they're kind of ready for. Go back into activity, come back, and eventually create a new narrative, a new story.
And so you've mentioned the 4 stages: anticipation, ending, passage, and that really gets us to the 4th one.
Yay, new normal. That's what everybody talks about right now. And we are not at new normal with the pandemic. Sorry. We've adjusted to our ending stage. We're not even in really passage yet, because you have to know the pieces before you can start to really put things back together.
You've been talking about this as we've gone into this transition with COVID. You've started to talk and apply these phases of transition and navigating transition. Even fatigue that you mentioned already, transition fatigue is, everybody's experiencing that around the world related to COVID. So go ahead and talk about a little bit about how you've seen people navigating COVID through this lens of transition.
It's hard to have leadership when it's happening to all of us and we're all thinking, what the heck? But there are some keys. As a transitionist, we know that it's not a time to make permanent change because we just don't know enough yet. As a transitionist, we look and we pay attention to the way we feel, that numb state, the exhaustion. I remember in July, all these articles were coming out about the naps people taking through the day. They were exhausted. And of course, they felt like, I'm not telling anybody I'm taking a nap. Bad enough I'm in my pajamas, but I'm not taking a nap. But there is that fatigue relationship shift and change. So we watch it, and we would assume that the ending stage is when we really, as a culture, are back to normal routines of life, whatever that is. And from that point on, it's about figuring out how you want to be in that space. So most people working from home, or kids are being educated. There's all kinds of new stuff happening, but it's all temporary right now. We just don't know. I think the election is a big enough deal. It's very magnified, and differences and divisions and all that. So I think that's just one more version of this disruption. So you have to kind of get beyond that. But the whole time when life is being disrupted, it sounds like a negative, and it is, but it is also positive. There's a creative force inside. And that's what we as transitionists look for. You want to protect from the negative. You want to make sure that there's rest and some resilience and rejuvenation. And then you want to harness the creative force and start to imagine that next. And that fourth state of new normal is a time when patterns feel normal, routines feel normal. You're not waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's no conversation about that, this and that and whatever. And it sounds like you just go on with life and say, whoopee. And yeah, I hope that you get to do that. But the lesson we can all learn is to figure out for ourselves, how do we do change? How do we do transitions? What worked? What was really terrible? What was really wonderful? Because, I hope we don't have pandemics again, but all of us will have disruptions in our life. That's how life moves forward. So it's a beautiful gift to figure out your personal transition style. What are your strengths? What are your struggles? And next time your life is disrupted, hopefully you have that mapped out. You have a certified financial transitionist, and you say, well, we don't know how this is going to go, but we know how you did last time. So let's go. That's the guide. That's what you want to go for. The definition for your listeners of a transitionist is, and it really is, we didn't make it up, honest to goodness. It is someone who is skilled and trained to manage change. And a financial transitionist is skilled and trained to manage financial change. I can't imagine a more important and rewarding career. Almost makes me want to go back into full-time financial planning because it's a spectacular and humbling experience.
I wanted to offer too that as you were talking, it made me think about different clients I've seen kind of navigate so far the several months we've been into kind of the disruption of COVID. And then also the pushback against systems, the, racist systems, and along with that, even economic systems and all of that. And another level of calling for change there. It's interesting because I was thinking, wow, I've seen a number of reactions, but a couple that really stand out. And one is where people feel like this is, like you said, this is not the time, you name it, as a decision-free zone. Some people are, reacting to this time of navigating COVID as a time where you're not making any decisions you don't have to make. You're not taking any action you don't have to take, and really being in a holding pattern in a way, or just really focusing on the basics of resilience and health, hopefully, and navigating the challenges as best as we can. It's not the time where a lot of people have the bandwidth to do visioning work. Sometimes that even has looked like financial planning work, where some people were wanting to do financial planning work with me, for example, towards retirement. And that's just been in a holding pattern since COVID. We can't do that yet. And then other people, particularly around like the political and social justice pieces, other people have experienced COVID as a time where they've shaken out the busyness and they've really taken it down to what matters to me, what matters most to me, and then what do I want to do about that? And so those people, because of the kind of work that I do with socially responsible investing and impact investing, and I've seen where I've had people reach out and say, I'm tired of this, and literally say, I'm tired of not doing something about this. And I want to do something in this piece of my life around my money and making sure that my money reflects my values, And so I'm seeing people really motivated to take action in certain ways as well. So it's interesting, this combination of different experiences that people are going through.
The latter that you just explained, I would say that they're part of the creative force of our disruption, and they're welcome to it, just need to rest, and others get activated. Knowing what you're ready for is a part of a skill, and that's part of why you work with someone who can help you. Some people want to do things, but they're really not ready. It's an angst. It's not a mission. I think what's happening personally, having had my head into transitions, even, these crazy things that happen, all have a purpose in the end. They take you someplace you weren't before. And it's your job to decide how high do you want to go through that? Where do you want to be on the other end? It's like a launching pad for something new. And if you see it as a creative force, it's certainly much easier than if you see it as being a victim of a destructive force. It's a mindset shift. And when you're working with someone like you, people can talk that through, because sometimes it's a combination. It looks like it absolutely is, but underneath there's something else, and underneath is usually more powerful. So it's a time to be careful. Use your resources, and part of the resource is your energy to get up in the morning, your energy to think clearly, to make the phone calls, and to show up for this or that, to, that old cliche, live the life that you want to see. I don't think that's ever been more clear than right now. And you can sift through pretty quickly the needs that are out there that call to you and those that don't. There's a crying need throughout the planet. And Mars is not ready for anybody yet. Red dirt's not my thing. I love all the cosmos and stuff. I study astronomy and quantum physics just for the fun of it. But the real work is right here, right now, person to person, soul to soul, heart to heart. And you don't even have to put your money in, just put yourself in. And if you've got money to add to it, that's usually a good thing. The kind of work that you're doing here in this podcast and with your clients and with your peers is really part of the force of change. And you don't have to know where we're going, but you signed up for this, my friend. You signed up for this even before we met. This is just who you are. The universe is just giving you a lot more opportunity, a lot more challenge. So I would say to all of us, lean into our challenges, because this is it. The show is on. The future is now.
I've heard you use this phrase, shaping change, which really resonates with me. And I feel like I'm still learning from you what that looks like, what that means. But I'd love for you to talk about how you're using that term.
Well, actually, it came up in the writing of the new book with Ross Marino. We titled it Shaping Change and intend to make it a series because he's also a CEFT. And when you think about what happens, life gets disrupted. Boom. So think of a jigsaw puzzle. All the pieces get blown off. Then you put the pieces back together, and some of them don't fit, and some of them, new ones need to come, and whatever. And you end up with a different picture at the end. It's not the same. Now, that's kind of an easy one because you say the puzzle and probably a similar picture. But some people use these disruptive events to absolutely rearrange themselves and their life. And it's awesome to watch that. And what I said, that quote from Christina, choice by choice, we spin life's straw into gold, is something that I guess I've known that for 20 some years. That's shaping change. You can't go back when life is disrupted. You go forward. You can bulldoze your way through it and make a whole bunch of yucky decisions and live with some regret. Definitely don't want to do that. That's the stuff you read about in the newspaper. Most people carefully work their way through and they're happy just to have survived it. So their money's okay, their relationships are okay. But then there are those who really want to lean into it and feel that they can shape this next. And it's a great word. It activates me. It's not like survive change. You get to do something with it, no matter what, no matter how horrible the experience is. Look at Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That's a great example of shaping out of pure misery. So we can all do it. What shape do you want your next life to be in? That thing that we have, that what if protocol, where we ask someone, if you could write the next chapter of your life, like for realsies, you could write that chapter and everything you wrote came true, what would you write? That's incredibly hard to do. Did you ever try and do that?
Yeah, I have in different ways.
It's hard. I try and take my own medicine. It's hard sometimes.
You really have to be in the right space for that, to be that creative, to be in that visioning. It's not something you can just sit down and power through.
That's right. That's right. And you have to have a calm mind to some degree. If you're overwhelmed and fogged in, and it's almost annoying to be asked. It's like, I can't even pour the Cheerios into my bowl, so leave me alone. But yeah, we ultimately do shape our lives one choice at a time. It is not as random as it appears. I know people have whole religious beliefs around that, and that probably fuels it even more, which is lovely. So yeah, I think people would say we in the financial transitionist business, we are in the transformation business. Some people like to say that. It sounds a little abstract to me, but shaping change, we help clients shape the next version of their lives. Sounds very real.
One of the first really powerful experiences I had of helping someone before I even became a financial advisor, way before I became a certified financial planner, way before I started to study and learn about financial transitions, I helped my mother-in-law navigate being widowed. My father-in-law had passed away suddenly in a traumatic car accident. He had really bad untreated sleep apnea, and one night fell asleep on the way home, as she always feared might happen. It happened, and fell asleep on the way home, hit a tree, was, flown to a trauma center, and just didn't survive. With that, as we've talked about, all the pain and suffering that my mother-in-law was going through with the loss of her wonderful husband, she also had this windfall of insurance payments. She went from a very stressful financial situation that they had been navigating for years and years, and suddenly had these checks sitting on her kitchen table for more money than she had ever seen in her life, basically. That was quite an experience to help her navigate. And I'd already been drawn to helping people with their personal financial life. So I just was naturally drawn to help her do that. But what I wanted to share about that is she had something inside her, even with her grief that she was going through, the loss she was going through. She had something inside her that kept bubbling up about the next house that she wanted to live in. And they lived in the house that they had always lived in from the time they were married as a very young couple. They lived in this one house out in the country, and very humble house. And she didn't want anything fancy, but she wanted to move into town, and she wanted a new sweet little patio home. And she knew the neighborhood. So she would drive through the neighborhood, and she had this vision that she was creating of what she was being drawn to. And she had people in her family who were telling her, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't afford that. That's not for, basically, like, in so many ways giving her the message, like, that's not for you. You can't want that. You can't expect that." And so we sat down one day and I helped her look through her finances to determine, like, what do the numbers say? Is this a choice for you? And we could see, I showed her very clearly, like, this is a choice for you. If you want this is a choice for you. And, that was so exciting for her. and brought so much joy to the rest of her life, to have this sweet little dream home that she at some point thought that I could never even possibly dare to want. So anyway, that's just a really personal experience of just helping somebody navigate that and watching like them go through that transition and the visioning. I think the visioning and the pulling, like it's there if you listen to it and you get that support.
I like the fact that she didn't just jump into it and that she didn't listen to other people who told her no. Those would be the two kind of things that could create regret. And even if she could afford it, if she had jumped into it, the criticism and any little wrinkle would have felt bigger. But that's a great story.
One of the things that I've really started to notice is when I work in supporting women who have gone through an inheritance. And I had a client even say to me, I didn't just inherit the money, I inherited the system. And that has really stuck with me. And I just continue to think about that and notice like, what are the systems that people are inheriting? And how does that play into them being able to navigate their transitions, their financial transitions, and just their life transitions related to that inheritance, related to the loss of likely a parent in that situation. So two ways this is particularly relevant to my clients. One is most of my clients are women. And I feel like women, not just me feeling this way, but women are known, to have been treated by the financial industry, a very like male dominated, male perspective financial industry over history. Women have been patronized, have been directed, bossed around, not listened to, shut out, not invited to the meetings, and I'm speaking from a client perspective here. So women not being included and not being supported by financial professionals for so long, that is definitely getting better. We still have a long way to go in the industry with it. So women navigating that reality, and also my clients wanting to do socially responsible investing and impact investing and getting, the reactions typically that they will get in a what I would call a conventional financial advising culture. A lot of times is they get a lot of pushback, they get a patronizing reaction, a figurative or literal pat on the head, So they're navigating these things and they know what's important to them, they know what matters to them, but they have inherited this system that they now have to navigate.
When you say systems, I relate to that as there's a significant amount. It's not $1,000. It's a significant amount, and it's come through some lineage, a parent, grandparent, and however.
And I'll just help add to what you spoke before about team. One example you gave was with the Taylor family, with a new sudden money windfall, they're building their team. And then this example now that we're talking about, I see it as they've inherited the systems and structures, including the team, and now they have to rebuild their team that works for them.
Right. And the rub comes when your beliefs and values don't line up with the beliefs and values of the team that has been there. And let's just make a positive assumption, been there and maintained the wealth. People tend to judge the money or judge success in a family by how they have protected the wealth and or grown the wealth. So, stewardship comes in there. And it is hard if you're at odds, if there's a prevailing thought that we do this, no, we don't do that. So when you become part of the we, it is hard, and it takes time to navigate an and. We do this, and I do this. And there are people who are, like Peggy. Peggy's been your trainer in this program. She studies at Purposeful Planning Institute, is dedicated to this experience. And it usually takes some formal approach to breaking a norm. Norms don't generally happen when someone says, the heck with you, I want. And, you frequently have some legal right to do that, but then there's a cost in relationship and continuity in the family and that, which is important. So what I have seen is that to work it through in a formal approach, like a business plan. Philanthropy is generally sort of the business of giving and sharing. And if you want to have your own version of that, I think it requires some research and some written approach. And I remember one family, this was coming up, and what the person wanting to do things differently asked, what form should my request take? We sent them back with that question.
Great question.
Yeah. If this was going to be a legitimate conversation or request, what form should it take? And they put some real pressure to make, in this case, to make it very formal, And what she said, I love this. And she said, can you give me a good example to follow? And they couldn't. They were making these things up. And it was kind of a stall tactic. So she finally got a sample. I forget where she got it. It wasn't from them, but she said, would this be what you're talking about? They said yes, because they knew that they didn't know.
Which is great, because otherwise you may be trying to navigate a moving target, and then you're spending a lot of energy and not really getting where you're trying to go.
We're very collaborative, right? It's not pushing. It's just saying, if this, then how? Tell me how. And I think they were embarrassed when she called them on it and said, can I have an example? And they just didn't want to do the work. So she did the work and they finally said yes. And it took a long, long, long time. And one of the things I heard through the grapevine after this, a couple of years back, or after it happened, was she said, in retrospect, it was a good exercise for her. She got to do what she ultimately wanted to do, but she knew so much more about it because she went through this process. It's become kind of one of those shared experiences. So other people would say, oh, could I have a copy of that kind of stuff.
It takes the pioneers in the ways that we don't even think about. People really have to pioneer the change.
Some people are pioneers and other people are scouts. Scouts go out beyond the pioneers. So some people are called to be a scout, particularly in disruptive times.
Thank you so much, Susan. Is there anything else that you would like to add or share?
Carrie, I could talk to you all day. I just think so much of your work, and I wish everyone who's listening well. I hope they're percolating and finding some ground to move on that really serves them, because they serve all of us. We serve each other. Choice by choice, we spin life's straw into gold.
That is going up on my wall. I love that.
Christina Baldwin, let's give credit.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Susan.
It's always a pleasure, Carrie. Be well.